Hi, I'm Elle, wine newbie.
Wine newbie.
Why I'm here?
Why am I here? I'm Patrick Farrell, Master of Wine, and my good friend.
I'm his good friend.
Yes. Hi, good friend.
Peter Koff, also Master of Wine.
The idea behind this tasting was my idea, and it's to focus upon discerning quality. Discerning quality is very important. And so what we have is that I went out and purchased 4 wines, all from the same producer, the Robert Mondavi Winery, with a long history of quality production, though at very different price points. The lowest price point is $10, and a wine that's only California appellation. The other 3 wines are all Napa Valley appellation, which is a more expensive appellation and a higher quality appellation, including the most expensive wine, which is a reserve To Kalon Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon that costs approximately $250. So we're looking at a wide range of prices, and we'll see where the qualities work out.
Of course, for me this is very topical because I'm in the business and I basically bet my business on my palate every day. As I've always said, blind tasting is a parlor game. Where it gets deadly serious is tasting for quality.
Yeah.
Because people are relying on you and you are relying on you to buy stuff that has quality. So, what are the elements of quality? In broad terms, outside of what's tasting in the glass, what you've got in the glass, you need the few basic elements. Fine terroir, fine cepage, grape variety, and talented winemaking. All that implies great grape growing, you didn't overcrop or even undercrop for that matter, you picked at the right time, you didn't over oak, things like that. When I'm thinking, is this a wine, is it good versus others? I think overall it comes down for me to complexity, but good complexity. There's bad complexity if there's all sorts of things that are disharmonious going on and some of them are ugly or smelly, or it's all things that are working together. From the minerality that one can express more from better terroir, minerality being, in my mind, an expression of the soil through the grape, but not the grape itself.
Though that would apply more with white wines than red wines.
I find it too with red wines. And where can you see quality? Well, you can see quality not just on the palate or on the nose, but even when you start to look at the wine. There are gradations of color. Mm-hmm. And there are more gradations of color and more changes in hue, and in some instances more intense hue, given the grape variety, of wines that are better. Why? Because they're made in the right place from grapes that haven't been overcropped. You're looking for harmony, you're looking for something that goes around in the mouth, that in some instances has what I call the peacock tail. It crosses over the mouth and fans out like a peacock tail.
I have this image with you with a peacock tail in your mouth, Peter.
How do you see it?
I break it down several different ways. In general, not 100% across the board, the deeper the color the Cabernet Sauvignon wine is, there's a tendency for there to be higher quality until you reach a certain point where people have over-ripened the grapes and the quality falls off dramatically. So the grapes that are coming from sites where they're producing lower price wine are going to be more diluted. What aromas am I getting? How much of them am I getting? The flavors, am I getting just a single note or multiple notes denoting complexity? Are they pleasant flavors that linger long on my palate? Are they unpleasant flavors that linger long on my palate? If there's oak, is the oak integrated? Does the oak overwhelm the fruit? Length of finish and balance. So those are the elements that come into play. Do you have any questions?
I don't know what the To Kalon Vineyard?
The To Kalon.
To Kalon.
To Kalon.
To Kalon's one of the most famous old vineyards for red wine production in the state of California. And there's a large chunk of it on the Robert Mondavi Winery.
They also make a highly acclaimed Sauvignon Blanc.
So the Robert Mondavi Winery is in Oakville. Their best vineyard is the To Kalon Vineyard, though with marijuana becoming legalized in the state of California, some of us used to joke around that you could toke a lot on the To Kalon Vineyard.
There's another thing, when you talk about quality. Back in the day, I'm talking 30, 40 years ago, long before even thoughts of global warming, not only in Germany, but even in Bordeaux, for example, Burgundy, you made the wine. The higher the alcohol that you got in the wine by natural fermentation, without chaptalizing, was considered the better the wine, because clearly you had grapes that were either riper or more intense. They had higher sugar levels. Bordeaux Rouge. And I think in those days it only had to be 10.5 or 11%. It would be called Bordeaux Rouge. Now if you wanted to call it Bordeaux Supérieur, then it needed to have an extra half or percent of alcohol. Because back in those days, that was one of the ways you could tell quality, was that the grapes that were capable of producing higher alcohols were of better quality. That's gone. That is not a way of looking at it anymore. Some of those appellations still exist, but that's not a valid way of looking at the world
And the
anymore.
fascinating thing is that those appellations were based upon ripeness.
Yeah.
And now the issue facing the same appellations, not only those appellations, but places all over the globe, is overripeness.
Overripe.
Overripeness increases the alcohol level, lowers the acidity. Once you get Cabernet, when it's unripe, has green characteristics, can be green bean, can be very unpleasant, unripe Cabernet Sauvignon, and the tannins can be mean and metallic. And as you get riper, you get into cassis, cherry. When you get overripe, you lose those beautiful fruit characteristics, and now you start getting raisin. For me, raisin in a Cabernet Sauvignon is bad news.
Yeah. Well, like porty.
Okay, so we were talking about color and how color in Cabernet is different from color with Pinot Noir. In general, the lighter the color in Cabernet tends to be less quality. Not 100% the case. Not the case in Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir's thinner skinned, lighter colored wines. And when I find a Pinot Noir that's as dark as a Cabernet, I'm thinking to myself, they've added something here and this could be terrible. So it works differently. But when we stand up and we look at these wines from above, I see that the first wine, the wine on the left, is the lightest by far in color. Wine number 3, much darker, but only the second darkest wine. And then wines 2 and 4 being much more dark. You get colored 2 other ways. One is by tilting and looking at the meniscus. Can I see through it? I can see through the first wine, which makes me suspicious that may be the $10 bottle of wine. And I really can't see through any of the other wines. But there's gradations of how densely colored they are. I may be able to see through the fourth one a little bit. And then the other thing you look for is that when you swirl the wine and you're looking for a grape like Cabernet Sauvignon, wines with greater extract, as Peter has taught us many times, are going to, in the legs, are going to show pigment. And that's a sign of increased extraction.
Another thing, very often when you're tasting, because of a lot of cheap wine being used to pander, very often, again, not always, cheap wine is actually slightly sweet.
And part of that is pandering, but part of it also is that sometimes the grapes are less ripe because there's been a higher crop. The wine can have more bitterness to it from tannins and some flavors of the unripened fruit. And the way you inhibit bitterness is with sugar. So leaving some residual sugar in the wine is a way of trying to cover it up.
Okay.
Yubi, what do you think? Which one do you think was the least good, presumably the least expensive, and which one the best, presumably the most expensive?
Okay. I think the cheapest one is number 1
Yeah.
because it was easy to drink. Do you guys think number 1 is the cheapest wine?
Yes, and
Yay.
for some of the things that you said, it's by far the lightest in color. By far is the least expressive of the wines. It's by far the easiest one in some ways to drink right now. It's the wine that shows place least of all the other wines. And what I mean by place, we've got Cabernet fruit, but there's nothing that's giving me an idea as to really where it comes from. This type of wine can be produced in many parts of the globe. What they did do a good job with here, having tasted many inexpensive Cabernet Sauvignons in my day. When you're judging wine, and at 8:30 in the morning you're judging 50 or 60 inexpensive Cabernets from around the world, that is torture. Because you're dealing with a lot of greenness, hardness, terrible wines. And for an inexpensive Cabernet Sauvignon, it does taste a bit like Cabernet Sauvignon.
It's well done.
It's showing variety. It's not green. There's inexpensive oak here. I'm sure it must be staves, or even chips, but it was done well. And so it's an inexpensive wine that is done well.
And now the most of them. Which one was the best for you?
I picked number 3 for the most expensive wine.
Tell us why.
it's got more weight than others, and it's darker and it's not really easy to drink. It has harsh tannin in it.
So, but you can't pick it as the best one because you liked it the least.
Yeah, exactly.
You shouldn't do that.
Okay.
What about you, Pat?
I thought that the second and the third wines were much more approachable now than the fourth wine. I mean, for me, the fourth wine, as the French would say, avant-garde, a wine that needs time. And so on the basis of the fact that that seems to be the most extracted of the wines, and I could be wrong here, that may be the most expensive wine. Sometimes when you have very expensive wines, especially Cabernet Sauvignons, Bordeaux's, those wines, trying to drink those wines young, if you've not decanted them for a good number of hours, people are going to be disappointed when they open up this young Cabernet Sauvignon that was designed to last a longer period of time.
Like the vintage champagne?
No, vintage champagne you can drink right from the get-go. Okay? It's different if you age it. But with very firm red wines, the tradition, certainly in the UK, was to age Bordeaux's a long period of time, or top quality Bordeaux's, because those wines got better when you aged them.
For me, number 3 was head and shoulders above everything else. It was minerally, it was complex, it started before the others, finished after the others. Obviously these 3 wines, 2, 3 and 4, were in a different class from wine number 1. They were all good. For me, in terms of quality, starting at the best, 3, 2, 4, 1.
And again, it all depends upon how you're viewing quality. There's a way of tasting that you make the argument, and it's a reasonable argument to make, which of these wines would I rather drink today? For drinking right now, my favorite wine for drinking, as is yours, Peter, is number 3. When I take into account that some top quality Cabernet Sauvignons are meant to age, that's why I went with number 4 being the most expensive wine, and potentially with age being the best quality wine. But for drinking today, the wine I would want to drink is number 3. 2, 3, or 4, you can age any of those wines.
For me, when I'm tasting wine quality, there's very definitely a time element involved. I want the wine that drinks the best now. I also want it to be ultimately the best wine. But I also want the one that drinks the best now, because when I'm buying wine for my customers, I'm not asking them to wait. Personally, I'm getting older. I don't want to wait.
And I agree with that on one hand, but on the other hand, take the counterpoint, is that traditionally, Cabernet Sauvignon, either from Napa Valley or from the Médoc, those wines gave a return in terms of more fruit, more complexity, longer finish, smoother mouthfeel with bottle age. And so it can be difficult sometimes predicting, unless you know the property, the region, and the vintage well, it's tough to get into the predicting game. Though I found all of these wines to be balanced. I didn't find a single wine to be markedly overripe. I didn't find them as a group to be over-extracted, though 4 was the most extracted of the wines.
Good lineup.
Wines to me. Yeah.
Good lineup.
You know what? My score is exactly the same with Peter.
You could see through the first one. It's medium red in color. On the aromatics, it had muted cherry and some vanilla from oak, slightly sweet entry, medium bodied, medium acidity, 14-ish alcohol, medium to medium plus tannins. The tannins were a bit astringent and a bit bitter on the finish. I thought it was fairly good as a price point, though the tannins did leave a metallic taste in my mouth that I had to wait a little while to get rid of before I went on to wine number 2. Number 2, deeper in color, much more on the nose. Cassis, cherry, lead pencil, cigar box, somewhat integrated oak, rich, powerful, deep fruit. Even on the finish, the fruit outlived the oak. Full-bodied, medium acidity, 14.5% alcohol, ripe tannins, very good length and quality. I had similar notes for wine number 3, except it was a bit tighter on the nose, similar aromatics, similar structure, except that I thought wine number 3 was tighter than wine number 2. I thought it had a longer aging potential. And then wine number 4, deeper in color, purple garnet. The nose was a bit tight, cassis, oak. It was the most tannic of the 4 wines, full-bodied, medium acidity, 14.5% plus alcohol. The firmest of all the tannins. The oak seemed to dominate the fruit on the finish. And this was a wine that I called a Vin de Garde, a wine that was going to need a good amount of time in the bottle. And by that, what do I mean? At least 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now.
For me, overall, number 3 is the best.
Okay, let's see what it is. From number
Yeah.
1.
Yeah, let's see them all.
Okay. So number 1 is Vent 2022.
This wine, I was wrong. It wasn't $10. It's $6.29.
6-2, that's a hell of a deal.
Yeah.
It's a good value.
Hell of a good deal, right? Not my cup of tea, but I appreciate. This is the.
I've drunk a lot worse
Yeah,
than that for a lot more money.
I have as well, right? Shows Cabernet characteristic. It's inexpensively oaked, but they did a good job. Actually, the private selection, those wines used to be terrible. They used to have really harsh tannins, and they've done a really good job at tannin management and producing a very good value wine.
I loved it.
Let's see wine number 2.
Wine number 2 is
Vendu.
Vendu.
This is the 2019 Cabernet Sauvignon Oakville from Napa Valley, which would have been the Oakville was $89. It's the second most expensive wine.
Ooh, I got it right.
And again, so when we generally talk about quality, right?
The second most expensive one.
Yes.
Yes. So we talk about quality. Generally, when we're talking about potentially good places, the closer we are, the more specific that land is, generally the quality gets better. So we talk about, there's California. Within California, we've got Napa Valley. Within Napa Valley, we have Oakville, which is a fairly specific place. Even more specific will be the Tokelon vineyard in the reserve wine. But that said, let's see what the third wine is.
Is Tokelon in the Oakville?
Tokelon's in Oakville,
Okay.
but a very, very small place within Oakville.
Like these properties?
No,
It's a
Bigger
single,
than
it's much bigger, but it's a single vineyard.
it's a single vineyard.
Yeah.
Number 3 is...
And number 3, is a surprise,
I got it right.
and Peter as well. So number 3 is the Tokelon vineyard. This is a 2018 reserve.
Which was another spectacular vintage. That's also a part of it.
Yeah. And I got faked out into thinking that the more extracted tannic one was going to be the more expensive. So
The reason why I did struggle with them a little bit, in the end, there was a rawness to this wine that this wine didn't have.
Right.
There's something slightly raw.
And that last one then, it's 21,
And
and it's the Cabernet Sauvignon from the Napa Valley, is $43. The Tokelon was $245. 2 and 3 were the best wines for drinking now, and those are the best wines overall. So I was wrong that the fourth wine is a bit over-extracted, will be better in some period of time, but they took the more modern approach, and those wines, 2 and 3 are beautiful wines.
I got to say, I hate when I have to say this because it really makes me sound like a snob, but if I was wanting to drink these wines, could I drink all of them? Yeah, I could. But I really only want to drink number 3.
You like expensive wines?
No, I spend my whole life as a member of the trade trying to find wines for my customers that are not expensive but give the same pleasure.
Mm-hmm. That's the key as a merchant. I agree. The wine number 3 is a beautiful wine.
I could get married, and I don't even like big Cabernets like this. The wine's superb.
But in the world of big Cabernets, the only one of these that in my mind I would call a big Cabernet would have been wine number 4,
Yeah.
right? And so they did a wonderful job in managing the tannins and keeping the complexity and the vibrancy of the young fruit. So you and I
Iron
have,
Fist, Velvet Glove.
yeah, as opposed to the Iron Fist and the kick in the nuts that you get in some of the trade tastings. You have some bottle of wine that's being sold for $300-400 a bottle, and the people are oohing and eyeing over it, and you take it, and it's like being punched in the face. Your palate is ruined for a long period of time. You get no pleasure out of it. These are modern but beautifully made wines.
Right.
I got to say, I'm spoiled by these 2 wines. If I had had this for $43, Napa Valley, Robert Mondavi, I would be happy.
And we know from experience, the Robert Mondavi Winery had been a supporter of the Institute when Peter and I were early in the Institute and then later on. So I've been to the Mondavi winery and we've had dinners there, where we've tasted old reserve Cabernet Sauvignon and old regular bottling. The reserve wine ages better, but this regular bottling of wine can do very well 20, 30 years down the line.
But we were all scammed at those tastings because De Vere is such a good palate. He made sure he gave us like the gems.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't only the gems of the vintage, but they were the team, and I was fortunate enough to be part of the team, a junior member of the team, tasting through the different bottles, because they'd open up a number of bottles, and there was bottle variation, especially in these older wines, and so the MWs and the MW students got to taste some gorgeous wines.
Hell, if you don't get to do that, why bother to become an MW student?
Yeah.
Patrick got tricked.
Were my favorite two wines the most expensive wines, or was the most tannic of the wines the one that
Second cheapest one.
Right. So again, there's sometimes
you know too much.
Sometimes you know too much.
That's always been a problem with me.
Yeah. So
Never a problem of knowing too little. Always a problem of knowing too much.
That's right.
But it was a good tasting.
Very good.
Right?
It was fun.
Very good. And I'm
Thank
pleased
you.
I didn't step all over myself,
Yeah.
because that's what I do for a living.
Mm-hmm. So the question is, wine number 3 worth 2.5 of wine number 2?
So I scored wine number 2, my second highest score, 18 minus. Wine number 3, 19.5. But the point is then, should it cost that amount of money? Go back to our earlier discussion where I said, when you get to 18 or 19 and you want to get for another point, it's an order of magnitude almost. So yes, because Mondavi knows what they're doing. Every now and again, a newbie, not you, a newbie comes out of nowhere, gets it right, doesn't know how to price the wine, and makes a 95-point wine for $30. But for the most part, when you've been in this business for as long as Mondavi has, there's no virgins left in Mondavi anymore. They know exactly what they have, and they charge accordingly, and they got it right. And that's unfortunately what it is. When you go to a place where the wines are well known, where they have a history, where they have a sales history, where they have an auction history, they don't make mistakes on pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I learned a lot.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun.
And you finished 2 glasses.
You're not.
No,
you're not telling the truth.
The glasses evaporated. This breeze.
Okay.
The devil made me do it.
Cheers.
Subscribe and like. Cheers. Thanks for watching.
The devil in the red dress, red dress, red dress. Devil with the red
The
dress
devil
on.
wears Prada.
It's not.
You're complaining about me drinking. You said not 20 minutes ago that you were planning to drink a lot. Yeah, there's mine. I didn't drink it. There it is.
Ooh.